The coffee in my hand cost $4.50. The email on my computer screen was about to cost me everything I had built over 12 years of my life. The subject line read simply that a compensation review was scheduled for a mandatory meeting at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. My name is Edward Vance. I am 46 years old, and I have spent the last 12 years working for Crestline Solutions. I am a divorced father of one son, Leo, who is 17, and depends on me for everything from our monthly rent to his future college savings. I read the email twice, feeling a cold weight settle in my chest. Corporate language always hides bad news behind professional words. A compensation review never means a raise. It always means they are taking something away and calling it organizational progress. I had watched this exact pattern happen to others. Sarah from sales was targeted last spring, and Robert from operations suffered the same fate 6 months before that. Good. Dedicated people walked into those quiet corner offices looking confident and came out looking completely destroyed. Now it was my turn. I closed my laptop and checked the time. It was 1:47 in the afternoon. I had exactly 13 minutes until whatever was coming next. My son Leo did not know anything yet. He was starting his final year of high school, dreaming about engineering programs at prestigious universities that cost over $62,000 a year, counting on his father to keep the promises made after the divorce 5 years ago. The divorce happened because I worked too much, because providing for my family became my entire identity, and because I foolishly believed that loyalty to a company meant long-term security for my family. It turns out I was wrong about a lot of things. I grabbed my folder and walked toward the Human Resources Department like a man heading to his own execution. The office smelled of cheap industrial cleaner and recycled air. White walls, gray carpets, and motivational posters about teamwork that nobody actually believed. Donald Harris sat behind the massive wooden desk. He was the Human Resources Director, a man in his early 40s who always wore silk ties that cost more than my weekly grocery bill. Next to him sat Victoria Albright, the new Chief Operating Officer brought in 8 months ago by Silverbridge Capital, the private equity firm that bought us out in 2020. She was the kind of executive who had never actually built anything in her life, but she took immense pleasure in tearing established systems apart. "Edward," Donald said, his voice dripping with practiced corporate sympathy, "thank you for coming." I sat down and kept my back completely straight. If this was happening, I would not look weak. Donald slid a blue folder across the desk. "We have completed a comprehensive compensation analysis across all departments," he said. A comprehensive analysis was always the corporate code for hiring high-priced consultants who had never done your job to tell the executives that you were overpaid. After careful consideration, Victoria added, speaking for the first time, "We are implementing salary adjustments to bring compensation in line with current market standards." I opened the folder, read the first page, and then read it again because my brain flatly refused to process the information my eyes were seeing. My current salary was $112,000. The new salary listed was $35,000. The room became deathly quiet, except for the low hum of the fluorescent lights and my own heartbeat hammering in my ears. $35,000 a year. That was a 69% pay cut. That was less than I had spent on Leo's education, health insurance, and basic living expenses for the last 2 years combined. I looked up at Donald. His face was a completely blank slate, showing no emotion at all. "This has to be a mistake," I said, keeping my voice level despite the screaming panic inside me. "It is not a mistake," Victoria said, her eyes fixed firmly on her tablet screen, refusing to make eye contact. "This reflects appropriate market positioning for your specific role." "My role has not changed," I replied. "I am still managing our 6 largest accounts. I am still generating 35% of this entire department's revenue. I am still the only person the clients call when their systems fail at 3 o'clock in the morning." Donald cleared his throat. "Your responsibilities will be adjusted accordingly," he said. "Adjusted how?" I asked. "That will be determined over the next 90 days, Victoria said, still not looking at me. So, they were cutting my salary by nearly 70% and had not even figured out what my new duties would be. That told me everything I needed to know. They did not want me to stay, they wanted me to quit. "What is my alternative?" I asked. Donald blinked in surprise. Alternative? You can either accept this new rate or resign from the company. So, what happens if I do not sign this agreement? I asked. Then we will consider it a voluntary resignation, Victoria said coldly. There it was. I could either accept poverty wages that would not cover my rent, or I could quit voluntarily, leaving myself with no income and no unemployment benefits. Either way, they believed they had won. I need time to consider this, I said. We need your final decision by the end of the business day, Victoria stated. 5 o'clock this afternoon. I stood up, picked up the folder, and walked out of the room without saying another word. I made it to the parking garage before the weight of the situation crashed down on me. I sat in my car, the engine off, staring at the concrete wall. $35,000 a year. That was roughly $2,900 a month before taxes, and maybe $2,200 after. Our rent alone was $1,400. That left only $800 a month for everything else. Food, electricity, insurance, gasoline, and Leo's school expenses. The math did not work. It could not work, not with a teenage son counting on me for his future. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a text message from Leo. He needed $50 for his robotics club supplies by tomorrow. I stared at that message. Yesterday, $50 was something I would have sent without second thought. Now it felt like an impossible demand. I typed back that I would get it for him and told him not to worry. But I was worrying. I sat in that car for 90 minutes, running calculations that made my stomach turn, watching other employees walk confidently to their cars as the afternoon light slowly shifted. I spent 12 years of my life building Crestline solutions. I started in 2013 when we were just a small startup trying to compete with the industry giants. We had only 30 employees, and everyone worked constant overtime because we believed in the company's future. I was hired as a junior account manager, making $28,000 a year. We had no real benefits back then, just the promise of opportunity if we proved ourselves. And I proved myself. In my first year, I landed the Henderson Technologies contract, a $250,000 deal that kept our operations running when we otherwise would have folded. In my second year, I brought in Montgomery Industries, then Riverside Fabrication, and then Pendleton Systems. By 2016, I was managing accounts that represented 40% of our total corporate revenue. I was the person the clients trusted. I was the one who arrived at 6 o'clock in the morning and left at 10 o'clock at night, because that was what it took to build something lasting. I also watched my marriage collapse during those years. I tried to keep my career and my family together, but my ex-wife could not handle the hours. She could not handle that the company always seemed to come first, or that I was constantly answering emergency calls. She left, moving across the country, leaving me as a single father. I became everything to Leo. I was the provider, the parent, the coach, and the counselor, showing up to his robotics competitions and parent-teacher conferences running on 4 hours of sleep and too much coffee. Then Silverbridge Capital bought us in 2020. The private equity takeover should have been my warning sign. They arrived talking about growth, resources, and scaling our operations. The chief executive officer stood in front of the entire staff and promised that nothing would change, that they valued the culture we had built. What they actually meant was that they brought in ruthless consultants, planned massive layoffs, and intended to squeeze every single dollar out of the company before flipping it for a profit. It started quietly. They let go of the administrative staff first, then operations, then support roles, always using the same empty corporate buzzwords like restructuring, right-sizings, and operational optimization. My own team was reduced from 7 people down to just myself, Sarah Lopez, and Robert Jenkins. The workload did not shrink. It was simply dumped onto the 3 of us. I handled client emergencies in the middle of the night and covered positions that no longer existed. I did it all because I had Leo counting on me, and because walking away at my age with no safety net felt impossible. I thought my loyalty would eventually mean something. It turned out it meant absolutely nothing. I pulled my original 2013 employment contract out of my briefcase. I had grabbed it from my desk files right before the HR meeting, guided by a sudden instinct that I might need it. I read through the document carefully, line by line, searching for anything that could help me. I found what I was looking for in Section 7, a clause I had completely forgotten about over the years. The clause stated that in the event of a compensation reduction exceeding 20%, the employee could terminate their employment immediately without penalty and without being subject to the standard notice requirements. More importantly, I checked the rest of the document for any restrictive covenants. There was no non-compete clause. I had never signed one because Crestline was too small back then to worry about complex legal protections. They had operated entirely on mutual trust, and that was now their critical mistake. I did not need to steal files or download customer databases. All the crucial information was already in my head. I had spent 12 years building deep relationships with these clients. I knew the chief executive at Henderson Technologies had daughters in college. I knew Montgomery Industries was frustrated with our slow technical response times. I had built enough personal trust that these clients called my personal cell phone directly, instead of going through the official corporate channels. That was not stolen intellectual property, that was my earned reputation. As I sat there, my phone rang. The screen displayed an unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but some instinct told me to answer. I pressed the button and said my name. A calm, professional voice replied, "Hello, Edward. This is Raymond Mercer, Vice President of Client Services at Horizon Ridge." My stomach tightened. Horizon Ridge was Crestline's largest direct competitor, the company we had been fighting against for market share for a decade. "I know who you are," I said, keeping my tone cautious. "Good," Raymond replied. "Then you know we have been watching your career for a long time. Your client retention rate is 94% over the last 5 years. In our industry, that is nothing short of exceptional, especially considering the internal chaos at Crestline." "How do you know about that?" I asked. "We make it our business to know," Raymond said. "Every time we have approached one of Crestline's major accounts, they have told us the exact same thing. They said they would not even consider leaving as long as Edward Vance was managing their business. You are the only reason those clients have not walked away." I remained silent, waiting to see where he was going. "I am guessing you just came out of a very difficult meeting with Donald Harris," Raymond continued. "And I am guessing they made you an offer that felt like an insult." "How could you possibly know that?" I asked. "Because we have been expecting it," Raymond said. "We know how Silverbridge Capital operates. They cut the salaries of veteran staff, force attrition to avoid paying severance, and replace experienced managers with cheap labor. We have seen them do this at 3 other firms they acquired." My hands began to shake slightly. "Why are you calling me?" I asked. "Because we want to make you a real offer before you make any decisions you cannot reverse," Raymond said. "Can you meet me tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock at the Riverside Cafe on Ashford Street?" I knew I should probably say no, or at least take time to think, but I was 46 years old with a son to support and a salary offer of $35,000 that would not even cover our rent. I told him I would be there. I drove home on autopilot, parking outside our apartment building. I sat there for a long time, watching the lights in our second-floor windows. Leo was inside, probably working on his calculus homework, living his normal life, completely unaware that his father was trying to figure out how to survive. I could not tell him yet. I could not walk in and explain that everything we built was at risk. My phone buzzed with a text from my brother, Thomas Vance. He asked how the meeting went. I told him about the $35,000 offer. He replied immediately, telling me it was criminal and urging me to go to the meeting with Horizon Ridge. I got out of the car, walked upstairs, and tried to act as if everything was perfectly normal. Leo looked up from the kitchen table and asked how my day was. I lied and told him it was just a long day, then helped him with his school projects, all while my brain continued to run calculations in the background. After he went to bed, I stayed up researching Horizon Ridge, finding that they were stable, growing, and well-managed. At midnight, an email arrived from Donald Harris reminding me of the 5 o'clock deadline. I ignored it, closed my laptop, and went to bed, though sleep did not come. I woke up at 5:30 the next morning, made coffee in the dark, and sat watching the sunrise. At 6:15, I got dressed in a professional blazer and drove to the Riverside Cafe. I pulled into the parking lot at 10 minutes to 7. A clean black sedan was already parked near the entrance. I walked inside exactly at 7 o'clock and spotted Raymond Mercer sitting in a corner booth. He was in his late 40s, wearing a casual button-down shirt and looking over some documents on his tablet. He stood up when he saw me and extended his hand. "Edward, thanks for coming," he said. His handshake was firm and confident. I slid into the booth, and he pointed to a cup of black coffee that was already waiting for me. I looked at it and asked how he knew how I took my coffee. "We do our research," Raymond said with a small smile. "But to be fair, your brother Thomas might have mentioned it. He has been working with one of our senior analysts on a joint project for the last 6 months. He called me yesterday after you texted him about the pay cut. Thomas vouched for you. He said you have been carrying Crestline on your back for years, that you are far too loyal for your own good, and that the executives running your company are fools." I had to smile. That sounded exactly like my brother. The waitress arrived, took our breakfast orders, and left. Raymond pulled a neat leather folder from his bag and set it on the table. "I want to be clear with you, Edward," he said. "This is not a charity offer. We are not doing this because we feel sorry for you. We have wanted to bring you over to Horizon Ridge for the last 2 years. The actions of Silverbridge Capital yesterday simply gave us the perfect opportunity to make our move." He slid the folder across the table. I opened it and read the first page. The base salary offered was $155,000. I stopped reading and looked up at him. That was $43,000 more than my salary at Crestline before the cut. "Keep reading," Raymond said. I looked down again. The contract included a performance-based bonus structure tied to client retention and revenue growth, a comprehensive health and retirement benefits package, 4 weeks of paid vacation, and a signing bonus of $20,000. I had to read the signing bonus figure 3 times to make sure I was not dreaming. "Why offer this much?" I asked. "Because you are worth it," Raymond said simply. "Because we have watched you hold Crestline's entire client base together while their management cut resources from under you. We do not just want to hire you. We want to hire what you represent. We want someone who actually cares about the clients and builds real relationships." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "Edward, we are not like Silverbridge. We are operators, not vultures. We build businesses for the long term, and we want you to help us build ours." I kept my hand on the folder, feeling the first real wave of relief in days. However, there was one condition I needed to establish. "I am not coming alone," I said. Raymond raised an eyebrow and asked me to explain. "I have 2 people on my team who are essential to my success," I said. "Sarah Lopez and Robert Jenkins. They are highly skilled, and they are being squeezed by the new leadership just like I was. If I make the move to Horizon Ridge, I need to know there are positions for them as well." Raymond did not hesitate for a second. "We have already discussed that possibility," he said. "We have 2 open account management positions that we have been looking to fill. If they are as good as you say they are, we can have official offers ready for them by the end of the week." That was the moment I knew this was the right decision. I told him I would give him my final answer by noon. Before I stood up, Raymond leaned in closer. "There is one more thing you should know," he said. "We have heard reliable reports about Silverbridge's long-term plans for Crestline. They are preparing to offshore the entire client services division to a lower-cost region within 18 months. They are intentionally slashing salaries to force veteran employees to quit so they can avoid paying severance. They are betting that people will resign quietly, allowing them to replace local staff with cheap overseas labor." My stomach dropped as I realized the extent of their corporate greed. "Is that confirmed?" I asked. "We have seen the draft agreements with the offshore vendors," Raymond said. "This was their entire strategy. Reduce compensation until employees quit, offshore the work, and save millions of dollars without ever having to explain why they discarded their loyal staff. This information gave me a powerful legal shield. Under the Federal Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act, companies are legally prohibited from executing mass layoffs or department closures without giving employees 60 days of advance notice. By intentionally forcing constructive dismissal through salary reductions to avoid these legal requirements, Crestline was violating federal labor standards. I thanked Raymond, took the folder, and told him I would call him before noon. I did not go home. Instead, I drove straight to the Crestline Solutions office, arriving at 8:30 in the morning. My security badge still worked at the entrance, and I walked past the cubicles where my colleagues were staring intensely at their screens, avoiding eye contact. I walked straight to Donald Harris's office at the end of the hall. The door was open, and he was busy typing. I knocked once and walked in. He looked up, his expression shifting from surprise to immediate concern. "Edward, I was expecting your email," he said. "I need to ask you a direct question, Donald," I said, sitting down, "and I need you to be completely honest with me." He leaned back in his chair and nodded slowly. "Is Silverbridge Capital planning to offshore the entire client services department within the next 18 months? I asked. Donald's jaw tightened instantly, and his eyes darted toward the hallway. "That is not something I am at liberty to discuss," he said. "That is a clear confirmation," I replied. "You just gave me my answer." "I did not confirm anything," he said, his voice rising slightly. I pulled my original 2013 employment contract from my bag and set it on his desk, pointing to the signature page. I also pointed to Section 7. The clause allows me to terminate my employment immediately and without notice if my compensation is reduced by more than 20%, I said. "Since you cut my salary by 69% yesterday, I am resigning effective immediately." Donald picked up the document, his face turning pale as he scanned the lines. "Edward, let us not make any hasty decisions," he said, his tone softening. "We can discuss options." "I am resigning," I repeated. "My decision is final." "You cannot simply walk out on us," Donald said. "We have major client renewals coming up." I pointed to the contract in his hands. "That is my signature, and those are the terms the company drafted 12 years ago. I am exercising my rights under this contract. Furthermore, your attempt to force me out by cutting my salary to avoid triggering the 60-day notice requirements under the Federal Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act is a clear violation of labor regulations. If your legal team wants to dispute my immediate departure, they will have to explain that strategy in court." Donald stared at the contract, unable to find a counter-argument. "You will be hearing from our legal department if you attempt to take any company files," he warned. "I have not taken any files," I said. "I have not downloaded database records, and I have not copied proprietary information. The only things I am taking are my own mind, my professional reputation, and the relationships I have spent 12 years building. Those belong to me, not to Crestline." I stood up, walked out of his office, and left my security badge on the reception desk. I did not pack up my desk or say goodbye to anyone. I simply walked to the elevator, went down to the garage, and got into my car. By the time I started the engine, my hands were perfectly steady. I called Raymond Mercer from the car and told him I was accepting the offer. I would start on Monday. "Welcome to Horizon Ridge, Edward," Raymond said. I drove home, stopped at the grocery store, and bought the high-quality coffee I usually avoided because it was too expensive. I reached my apartment at noon. Leo was still at school, and the apartment was quiet. I sat at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and drafted a professional email from my personal account to my key clients. The subject line was "Moving Forward." I wrote that after 12 years with Crestline Solutions, I had decided to pursue a new opportunity and would be joining Horizon Ridge as the Senior Director of Client Services. I thanked them for the trust they had placed in me over the years and noted that I hoped we could continue working together. I hit send and waited. The responses began arriving within 30 minutes. The first was from David Henderson at Henderson Technologies. He congratulated me and asked if we could schedule a call to discuss transitioning their account to Horizon Ridge, noting that they had been frustrated with Crestline's service quality for months. The second was from Elizabeth Montgomery at Montgomery Industries, who wrote that they followed the manager, not the company, and wanted to move their account immediately. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I had received positive responses from 9 of my 11 major accounts. All of them wanted to transition their contracts to Horizon Ridge, representing $6 million in annual business. My phone rang, displaying the office number for Crestline. I answered it and heard the voice of Victoria Albright. "Mr. Vance, we are aware of the unauthorized communications you sent to our clients," she said coldly. We will be pursuing immediate legal action for solicitation. I did not send anything unauthorized, I replied calmly. I sent a professional notice of my change of employment, which is standard industry practice. The clients are choosing to move because they trust me. I have no non-compete agreement, and I have taken no proprietary data. I suggest you consult your legal counsel before making baseless threats. She was silent for several seconds, then hung up. I sat there and laughed, feeling the immense relief of knowing that for the first time in years, I was the one in control of my own destiny. By the end of the week, both Sarah Lopez and Robert Jenkins had received official offers from Horizon Ridge. They resigned from Crestline immediately, using the constructive dismissal caused by the salary cuts to avoid any notice penalties, and joined my new team. The transition of the 9 major client accounts went smoothly, and Crestline's legal threats quickly vanished once their attorneys realized they had no legal ground to stand on. I heard through industry contacts that Donald Harris was quietly reassigned to a minor administrative role inside the firm, and Victoria Albright resigned 3 months later after failing to manage the client exodus. Within 6 weeks of starting my new role, Raymond Mercer called me into his office. He showed me our performance metrics, noting that our client retention rate was at 97% and our account revenue had increased by 15%. He then slid a new folder across the desk, offering me a promotion to Vice President of Client Strategy, which included a $40,000 salary increase, bringing my base salary to $195,000. I accepted the promotion and began building a larger team, hiring 9 new professionals over the next year. 3 months after my resignation, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Andrew Bradley, the newly appointed Chief Executive Officer of Crestline Solutions. He apologized for how I had been treated by the previous management, calling it completely unacceptable, and offered me the position of Chief Client Officer with a base salary of $200,000 and a full seat on the executive board. I thanked him for the offer, but told him I was exactly where I needed to be, explaining that trust is not something a company can simply buy back once they have destroyed it. 2 years after I left, Crestline Solutions officially declared bankruptcy and folded. Silverbridge Capital sold the remaining assets to a liquidation firm, and 35 employees lost their jobs without severance. If I had stayed, if I had accepted that $35,000 offer, I would have been one of those employees left with nothing. Instead, I had financial security, a thriving career, and time to spend with my son. Leo graduated at the top of his class and went on to attend his dream engineering university, funded entirely by my success, including a $38,000 quarterly performance bonus. Over the next several years, I used my position at Horizon Ridge to help other professionals who found themselves in similar situations, offering opportunities to talented individuals like Victor Palmer and Matthew, who had been treated as disposable by their former employers. 10 years after leaving Crestline, I officially retired from Horizon Ridge at the age of 53. On my final day, my team presented me with a photo album documenting our achievements over the decade, along with a note thanking me for showing them how to fight for their own value. I sat on my porch that evening, holding a glass of whiskey, feeling a deep and complete sense of peace. I had learned that your professional worth is not determined by what an employer offers to pay you. It is determined by what you are willing to accept. The moment you refuse to accept less than you deserve, the entire world changes.